Welcome back to the Investor Professor podcast. This is Dr. Ryan Peckham, and this is episode 77. On today's episode, I am fortunate enough to be joined by Jason Skisic, the founder of Spear and Clover. Jason is an entrepreneur, veteran, and really does a great job of sharing his perspective on entrepreneurship, what it means to have a tribe, how important it is to be surrounded by others that are trying to improve their lives, improve their business. And so I really hope you enjoy this conversation. We talk about a number of different issues that entrepreneurs face, hiring employees that can be difficult for many entrepreneurs, and really how important your mindset is, your thought process. When you go into any kind of venture, really doesn't matter what the business is, but just your approach to life and how that can make you more successful and make you a better teammate for everybody that you come into contact with. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. And without further ado, let's get to work.
You dropped this.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, everybody. Today, I'm joined by Jason Skisic, a former U.S. Army veteran and entrepreneur extraordinaire. And so I'm really excited just to talk about entrepreneurship, what that journey looks like. Everybody's journey is different. And so, Jason, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, Ryan, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on the show and sharing your audience with me. I'm really excited to learn more about the man behind that voice.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there's something behind it. I just want to talk to you, really just get into how you got into entrepreneurship. So U.S. Army, I guess you're thinking about getting out. Most people, I would assume, did you have some jobs beforehand, or how does your your origin story start?
Yeah, so I have two entrepreneurial origin stories, and one is pretty quick in that I never really thought I was an entrepreneur, but when I look back, I've always been an entrepreneur. I would always fall deeply in love in something, and I would try to find a way to make it a job or a way to make money at it. The example being I loved snowboarding. I got a job at the snowboarding hill. I loved skateboarding. I was always working at the skate shop. I loved cars. I worked at the shop. I loved clothes, or wanted clothes, and so I worked at the mall. And so with the exception of the Army, pretty much every job I had as a young man was something that I was already excited about and wanted to be close to or get the discount for or whatever it might be. But really, I didn't think coming out of the military that I was going to become a entrepreneur. I thought I was going to go into the world of finance like you are. In fact, my internship while I was at school for finance was at a UBS ultra high net worth individual discretionary fund. It was super cool up in a high rise in Chicago. And even then I could see that the entrepreneurs were the only ones we were serving. So a couple CEOs, right? So I did two things when I got out of the Army. I went to school for finance, and ended up becoming a commercial banker. And I went and started a small CrossFit gym on a dusty fourth floor of a warehouse in Chicago with two military friends and I. And it just cut to a few years later, and I'm working on a $50 million deal. And the only thing I can think about is my little $9,000 revenue gym, in that warehouse. And so it became pretty clear that that was going to be the path for me. And so through a circuitous path, that's what I ended up doing.
So you have an interesting background just with your financial background and being a commercial banker. I worked at a bank for a while too. Were you surprised? I think sometimes people think of business owners and they have everything together. And then you look at a bank, you work in a bank and you're like, oh, wow. Some of them really do. And some of them, it's literally day to day, hour to hour. Are they going to make it?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough. I worked at, I don't usually say this, but it doesn't really matter because I have nothing bad to say. I worked at JP Morgan, and JP Morgan is famous for their fortress balance sheet. And what that means is it's really difficult to become a middle market client of JP Morgan. Right. However, once you become a client, so the only clients I really saw that didn't have their stuff together were the ones that had come in, maybe changed ownership, or the family had passed hands or something. And then there was a decline because they really just don't even take on, bad loans in general. Yeah.
Yeah. We had different experience. I worked for a community bank.
It's totally different vibe. Yeah,
So it's a
yeah.
completely different, it's one of those where sometimes you have people on Friday that are worried about making payroll,
Yeah,
which
with
is
us, it would typically be more like, grandfather starts a company, they grow it to a, $100 million revenue company, a brick
Mhm.
manufacturer, a sand supplier, or a
Right.
trucking company. And then maybe there's some sort of changing of hands between the family, or, they start to be distracted by other things. Or I had a few retail companies that are like local fast food chains, and, they obviously have
Mhm.
struggled with, as the world has kind of grown around them.
Right.
And car, I mean, I banked a couple of car dealerships, and dealerships were struggling at the time. But
Mhm.
honestly, a lot of what we were doing, it's funny because I think this is the first time I've talked about this, but I think it's worthwhile for this conversation. One of the things that I really remember was it was so difficult to become a client, but once you were a client, we would find a way to bend over backwards. Even when we were going to get rid of a company, we were like super delicate about it and always eased the transition to a new
Mhm.
bank to make sure that this company could remain a going concern. And I had the benefit of working through a lot of troubled companies, and people think of bankers as being evil, and I can tell you, at least at the commercial level and
Right.
probably even the corporate level, up until you get to like investment banking, really there was no cold-bloodedness. I mean, it was
Yeah.
certainly calculated, but we
Right.
we did a lot. The late nights that I had were usually bending over backwards to try and
Trying,
bridge the
yeah.
gap for a client.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Trying to help
yeah,
somebody out. And it's interesting your UBS experience just working, going, most
yeah.
people wouldn't notice that most of those were business owners.
Oh yeah,
But
and
you read like Millionaire Next Door,
yeah,
and a lot of times
yeah.
it's people who own businesses that, you just don't even realize it.
I mean, we had $4 billion assets under management in a discretionary trading fund. And the
Yeah.
guy, I'm going to shout out Paul Ginolette. Paul Ginolette would crush the market every single year for like over 2 decades.
Mhm.
He was in his 80s when I was working with him. And he would do it with a newspaper, a slide rule, and a little solar calculator, not even a computer. And I would come in the room with, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I'd come in the room with all my fancy Excel skills and stuff.
Right.
And I didn't know anything about anything.
Yeah.
He was so impressive. And
It,
shout out to him and Frank McCannon and those
it's
guys
like
at
it's
that
like
team.
Warren Buffett, man. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
like, I'm getting the same information that you get, but I'm just better with it.
It was a fascinating experience, and they were
Yeah.
so good to me, and
Yeah.
really and I had no business being in that room. One of the reasons that I look back on it, I never was passionate the way I was about other things like building businesses,
Mhm.
the way that people that I have good friends that I still
Yeah.
remain in touch with, that they want to see the Wall Street Journal. They want to know what M&A is going
Mhm.
on. They want to know what's going on in the market. They want to know, who's buying who or what new things are coming out. And that just never grabbed me the way that an entrepreneur literally standing at the top of the hill going, come on, everybody, we're going to go do this thing. Like
Yeah.
that to me, I just got chills, right? Like
Yeah.
that is what gets me excited.
Well, and the passion is a big piece. Like, I mean, when I'm talking to young entrepreneurs, people starting businesses, I always tell people, or, from my standpoint, if you're going to do something just because you think you're going to make a lot of money,
Ugh,
you'll never make it, because
yeah.
you'll never make it through the hard times in the beginning
Hmm.
to ever reap those rewards, because your passion has to carry you through for a number of years, right? I mean, it has to be something you really truly enjoy doing. Otherwise, you'll just burn out. Like, you just will not make it through.
I agree. I
And,
agree.
and when you talk to people who have experience, I mean, that's something that most people can, if you've done any kind of entrepreneurship, you realize, because no matter what the business is, what the industry is, there's going to be some tough times, and you got to have something a little bit stronger to really get you to stay with it.
Yeah, there's
You
just
know?
no amount of money. And I mean that literally. There is
Yeah.
actually no amount of money that can overcome you not liking what you're doing or not
Yeah.
liking the way your life is going or your
Right.
relationships. We could spend the whole rest of this podcast
Yeah.
citing sources of
Right.
some rich, famous person who's unhappy,
Yeah.
some titan of industry who's getting a divorce and their children won't talk to them. There's just
Hmm.
too many examples.
Right.
And I sleep great, man.
Yeah. So what are some of the lessons from your CrossFit gym?
Oh, that's a great question. So the number one problem right now for entrepreneurs. So for the record, I don't just work with fitness folks. I work with all types of
Right.
passionate entrepreneurs. I call them magicians. But I think I have a competitive advantage right now because the thing that I became an expert in is also the solution to the number one problem in the entrepreneurial world right now, and that problem is finding, hiring, and keeping a great team of employees. That's the biggest problem I hear about. It's not getting sales. It's
Hmm.
not keeping people on as clients. What it really is when I walk up to McDonald's, is the door locked because nobody showed up for work today? And
Right.
this has happened to everybody listening to this probably at some point, depending on where you live. And it just seems like from the very bottom to the very top, people have totally reorganized their priorities, and you just can't buy employees in the way that maybe you once did. And so that sort of industrial revolution system seems to be starting to crumble a little bit and wear away. And so what I became an expert at was, well, no, I didn't lose anybody during any of that stuff because most of my employees, most of my coaches were, professors at a college, or they had a good job in finance, or they were doing something else as a career, but they chose to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and come in and coach a 5, 6, and a 7 a.m. class for
Right.
$21.50 because they were super passionate about helping that person, those people in those classes, succeed and have a life change and be a part of a tribe that they had benefited so much from. And so now, as I look towards the future, and obviously I'm not starting a new fitness business,
Hmm.
I can't even imagine hiring somebody who didn't at least buy in on the mission, who didn't get energy from the majority of the things that I'm having them do every day. And the reality is that there is somebody out there that gets energy from every single job, at least the ones that are worthwhile.
Yeah. And so do you try to figure that out through interviews? Are you trying to get, employees through referrals? I mean,
Yeah.
how are you trying to weed out the ones that,
Yeah.
cross their arms and say they're a people person, but
Oh,
that
come on.
you know that they're not?
I mean, I think the truth is, Ryan, you can tell when you talk to somebody for a few minutes whether or not they are a rock star or not. That's like
Yeah.
number one. And the crossed your arms, I'm a piece of people person guy. It's like when I talk to somebody and they're like, "Hey, I connected with you on LinkedIn." I'm like, "Okay, I see where this is going." Uh, you know,
Yeah.
but truthfully, I'm a core values guy. I mean, this
Yeah.
tattoo, my podcast is called Spear and Clover. That's a spear, or that's a core value tattoo. And so
Hmm.
for me, the first thing is, let's identify a core value fit. Somebody, if you think back to your best clients or best employees, the ones that you tell them once and it just seems effortless, that's a core value fit. Whether you've
Hmm.
revealed that or not, it just
Right.
is. And if you think back of those great employees that you hired and then it never worked out and they were really good at what they do, but you just kind of butted heads in some way, that's not a core value fit.
Hmm.
And so what I try to do is I try to get front load that by doing a lot of work early to reveal core value fit. And so that's why when I take an entrepreneur through our course, the very first thing we do, because all roads lead back to that important Rome, the very
Right.
first thing we do is reveal mission and core values. Because usually people do that when they file for the LLC and then they slide it in a desk drawer and never look at it again. That is not how we do it. We do it until you'd shout it from the rooftops and fight
Yeah.
over it and beat your chest about it.
I think it's, some of the biggest surprises I've heard from people who, start their own business, all this stuff is you have something that you enjoy doing, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, you have a passion for something. And a lot of new entrepreneurs don't realize, oh, there's a lot of stuff that comes with this.
Mhm.
Filing paperwork, compliance, keeping up, it's all these little things that I think people get overwhelmed with. It's not necessarily the big things. And so I think identifying what not only what you're good at, but what you really enjoy doing, and then trying to find others that are a complement to your skill set,
Totally.
makes everybody's life easier. You
Yeah,
know,
in traction, they talk about first you find a core value fit, and then you make sure that that you're putting them in the right seat, right?
right?
So then it's like,
Right seat on
is
the
it the
bus.
right person, right seat? Wrong person, right seat? No. Right person, wrong seat? No. You want to be the right person, right seat, and then I think their thing is GWC. Do they get it? Do they want it? And are they capable of it? And I
Yeah.
think that's a pretty brilliant way to look at it.
Well, it's so much. I mean, like I just think about going back to your comment on you can tell a lot about somebody just the first couple minutes you talk to them. And it's so much more important to hire for attitude.
Mhm.
And, is this a person that I want to work around rather than skills that you could just train somebody to do, and
Yeah,
so,
Oh, sorry, I didn't. I apologize. Go
Well,
ahead.
I was going to say, like, so in some of my previous places I've been, they're like, oh, this person has 10 years experience. And I'd go, man, but that could be like 10 years of bad experience. I'm going to have to try to retrain. That could be 10 years of, you know, not what we're looking for. How's their attitude? I want to know about their attitude, their demeanor. I want to know about that before I want to know about their experience, and depending on what the job is, um, because I think it just you can correct so many other things, but it is so hard to change somebody's attitude or just their way that they look at life.
Yeah, I mean, I could use a great example. I was working at the bank and there was an underwriter, and knowing what I know now, I'm the furthest thing from an underwriter. There's an underwriter that I really looked up to. His name was Matt, and he was great. And he's perfect for his job. He gets energy from underwriting, from double checking and
Right.
checking and running the math and checking the contracts. And he summed it up in one little paragraph. He was like, every single morning I pull out of my car, I pull out of my garage, I close the garage, and I drive away. And then I turn around, I go around the block, and I drive by again to make sure the garage closed. Dude, you should be an underwriter. That
Right.
doesn't mean he's a bad guy. That means he's an amazing underwriter. That
Right.
means that, like, if I ran a bank, that's the questions that I
Yeah.
want to know about. Tell me about the things that everybody thinks you're crazy for double checking. And that's your
Yeah.
guy. It's
Yeah.
not me, but that's
Yeah.
your guy, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, well, and so, but so often, so many companies they hire just because, or they promote because somebody's been there a while. Like I
Ugh,
can't even tell you how many like sales organizations they take their number one
same.
salesperson, they make them the sales manager, and then all of a sudden their sales drop 50%.
Yeah, I mean
Right?
that's the sales conundrum, right? That's
Yeah,
the classic issue. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I mean,
Yeah.
just because somebody has this skill set to succeed doesn't mean they're going to be able to do it in every single area, or that they want to. I mean, some of
Yeah.
the best salespeople. I mean, they don't want to be a sales manager. They want to go out. It's a whole. That's what they're looking for. I
It's
mean,
Michael
they're not
Jordan,
looking for
Larry
that.
Bird, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I mean, you know, but it's funny because you start seeing businesses, they just make some make the same mistake over and over again.
Mhm.
So,
Well, I think that's because it's entrepreneurs have a blind spot for their own weaknesses, right? Entrepreneurs think if we just work hard at the things that we're great at, somehow we'll become successful, which is why I could introduce you to 500 of the best personal trainers you've ever met who really struggle to pay rent every month. You know
right.
what I mean? It's
Yeah.
because just becoming a better fulfiller, just becoming a better trainer or better oil
Yeah.
change person or better banker, it doesn't
Right.
matter. It's actually the other aspects which we choose to ignore. I mean, I remember even as a kid, I remember my mom wanted me to do my homework, so I would clean my room, and I hated cleaning my room. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I'd do anything I could to not
Right.
do it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we always, we, as you get older, I mean, you try to avoid the things you don't like. I mean, it's just the natural tendency of most people. So you have like with your stuff that you're working on, you have this mastermind deal, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you because I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle because entrepreneurship is pretty lonely.
Hmm.
And it's one of these things where there's a lot of hype going into it. Like you start telling your friends you're going to start a business and you're hyping it up. And you're like, oh, this is
Yeah.
going to be so great. Don't you think I'd be a good business owner? Oh, yeah, you'd be great. You'd be great. And then you open the doors and then all those people leave and it's like crickets,
Hmm.
And so it becomes very quickly do people realize, wow, this is a pretty lonely road. I mean, it's it's me versus the world type of deal or kind of a, person on an island. And so I think it's just such a great strategy, what you're working on as far as like getting people together so they can share strategies, things that aren't working. You know, I think that just having people around you that can save you time. Like I think about just working, you've owned a business, I own a business, and just going through somebody and going, listen, these are the things that if I would have known this, it would have saved me a year. It would have saved me 6 months. Like just learning from other people can be so powerful because, if they can save you time, it just makes things so much smoother for some people. And like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people spin their wheels. So just spend a little bit of time talking about your mastermind stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just to address your final point there,
Mm,
there's only two things that can speed up time. One is money, and the other is relationships, right?
mhm.
Relationships with people that have done it before you. And so, my good friend Scott Ferguson has this great way of putting it. He says, plus equals minus. Plus, you should always have somebody in your life as a mentor, somebody who's further up the mountain than you are to learn from, to spend
Mhm.
time with, to learn from. Sometimes that's somebody you know personally, sometimes that's somebody you pay. Equals, you should always be spending time with peers, with people who are at similar levels to you, maybe in different industries, maybe not. But you should be masterminding in some way, helping them, they're helping you. And then minus, you should always be reaching back down the path to help that next generation forward, right? And so for us,
That's a great
that's
analogy. That's such a good analogy. Sorry,
yeah,
keep
that's
going.
credit to Scott, but I love it because it's something that I've had. I've been very fortunate. I have an unbelievable few pluses. I've been a tribe builder since I was in sports and in the military. And so I have multiple equals of different groups. I'm involved in 4 different groups right now in various levels of equals, right? And then minuses, I've started masterminds for entrepreneurs, but I've even had a free mastermind for the younger guys that want to be entrepreneurs in my jiu-jitsu gym, right?
Mhm.
That I attend, not own. And to me, it's just so valuable, not just to give back, but also because by me teaching it to somebody, I get to see it instead of one dimensionally. I get to see it from all these different angles now as a teacher, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so that's been really great. And then with masterminding, I think the word mastermind gets thrown around a lot. So let me just explain what it initially meant and what ours is. So mastermind a lot of time is a professional organization with a guru at the top of it who's telling you how to do things. They're selling you answers, typically a tactical playbook or a series of strategies or tactics. There's nothing wrong with that in certain cases, right?
Right.
Some of those people are charlatans. Some of those people are absolutely awesome. I know both. We don't sell answers. We sell questions, and we sell fellowship and tribe, right? And
Mhm.
so when I work with somebody through the course, we have a course and we have a mastermind. The course is questions. I ask them the right questions to make sure that they can address the questions that their business is going to need them to answer.
Mhm.
When it comes to the mastermind, the structure of it's very simple. We have a professional expert guest speaker come in every single session, and he or she talks about what they're best at, whether it's investing, whether it's camaraderie, whether it's fitness, whether it's
Mhm.
sales, whatever.
Right.
And then we spend an hour in small groups masterminding, which is where we each bring our purpose, cause, or passion, and we each talk about our biggest hairy problem that we're dealing with right now. And almost every single time, somebody in that small group has been involved in something like that and has seen their way through it. And so we can magnify our experience this way.
Yeah.
And so what I envision is over time, this becoming an organization of thousands of entrepreneurs where every time one problem pops up, it's almost like AI. It's like a neural network, right? Every time
Right.
one new problem pops up, 1,000 minds tackle it quickly, and we move on, all having assimilated that knowledge.
Mhm.
And this is just a massive, massive force multiplier when it comes to effort.
And it shows that you break them up into small groups too, right? So
I
they don't
do,
get too
yeah,
so because if you I think if you get too big, people then don't speak up, right? So what have you
yeah.
found like you think is kind of the good size?
Right now, it's 4 or 5. I like
Okay.
4.
Yeah.
If you have 5, you get a little more experience, but you get a little less time. And so right now, it's
Yeah.
been 4. But I do like 4.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You have to play around with that, right? Like
yeah.
and people's personalities, play into that as well. One thing I'm always curious on people's disciplines and things of that like that. What disciplines did you pick up from the military or disciplines that you think help make you to be like the most successful version of yourself?
It's a great question, and it kind of goes back to the core value discussion we had earlier. So I know you may not be watching this, but I have a spear and an infinite loop of rope at the center of it that I call Spear and Clover tattooed on my forearm. I've had that. It's a personal core values tattoo I've had for a few years. And then last year, when I decided to start this company, I knew immediately that this would be the name. And so what that represents is one, the core value I was born with, and two, the one I earned in the military. So the one I was born with was Spirit of the Puppy, or ADP. ADD or entrepreneur's disease, whatever you want to call it. I'm high energy. I love people. I like trying new things. I'm curious. I'm playful. If I have a good idea, I'm ready to go off and go do it. This was great, but I didn't have any focus, and which is why I ultimately enlisted in the United States Army, right? And what I earned there, the second core value that makes me who I am, is military mindset. That's when there's an opportunity to take responsibility, I step forward. I show up on time. I never would let somebody down if I can avoid it. I try to live with discipline and respect of others. And so the combination of Spirit of the Puppy is what gives me sort of the visionary entrepreneur side of me, and the military mindset is what allows me to build the scaffolding to make sure that we get to the highest heights that are possible.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. I mean, ADD, ADHD, if you can hone it, it's pretty good. You know, like if you can focus it, you can get a lot of stuff done.
I call that shepherding my attention span. And so what I found was perfect example. We've already talked about it, right? I have the aptitude and want to be in this corporate banking world, but I have no interest. And so every day I come home tired and drained. I want to be snowboarding, and I'm reading magazines and books and interviewing people and going to the hill on my day off and doing all the things I possibly can. With CrossFit, I remember sitting on the toilet watching videos about how to mobilize and get back overhead mobility and When I get into things, there's no limit to my attention.
It's so key. You don't know this, but some of my listeners do. But my undergrad degree was in engineering. And I was so unhappy, but I was so unhappy. You know, my first job out of college, I was sitting in a cubicle doing engineering drawings. And it's a job that a lot of people would love to have, but I was like, man, I cannot do this the rest of my life. Like, I mean, you know, this cannot be the rest of my life, you know? And so I look back on that and I think of what a blessing it was, because I think if I would have had a job that I really enjoyed, the status quo would have been okay for me. And I would have it wouldn't have forced my hand on taking the chances that I took when I was in my 20s to kind of build up my own thing, you know? And so, because when I started applying for, you know, finance jobs or typical investment jobs, well, my degree was in engineering, not finance. So then I went back to school to get a finance degree. And so, but then all those guys had more years than me. And so I kind of had a job, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to start my own company. I mean, you know, and so it's, you know, I mean, there's a whole deal, and you have when in the beginning.
I got to address that. I'm gonna stop.
Go for it. Yeah.
I was once told really wise advice, and it was from a person who had multiple children that were going through college, and he said, every one of my kids gets an undergraduate degree in engineering, and then they become whatever they want to be. And the reason is, and this is why you started your own business, I would guess. I'm just guessing. I won't put words in your mouth. Engineers know how to solve problems every time. They know how to break things down into constituent parts and build up answers, right? So that I was an engineer in the Army, and just that little bit of that has totally changed the trajectory of my life.
It is, but you're a much more noble person than me, because in the beginning you said you know, you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur because of your interest in things. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur because I would work for people, and I couldn't stop thinking about what I would do if I was the person who owned the business.
Okay.
And I'd be like, okay, this is wasting time, money, resources. Like we don't need, you know, I couldn't turn off that analytical.
That bugs me too. Yeah. Yeah. Like we were pouring a concrete floor at my gym, and I was getting mad because we weren't doing it efficiently. Like we were trying to fire line the bags of cement. And I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it until we do it right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, there's a little bit of both to that, but I mean, it's, you know, but it's also, to me, I mean, the biggest driver for me has always been freedom. I mean, freedom to do what I want to do, have the time that I want to have, you know, do those things. And that was kind of always my, you know, North Compass, is just, I want to be able to have that freedom. And I know if I put in the work today, that freedom will come. So,
I just read this last night, so I need to tell it to you.
Sure.
Consider the difference between freedom to and freedom from. I was reading the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which I highly recommend to anybody that hears this. It's fantastic. He's unbelievable. But the idea is, as a young man or a young woman, a lot of people want freedom to do this, do that, do the other. And then as an older person, a lot of people want freedom from being poor or whatever.
Yeah. Meetings.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
I mean, just, exactly. And I think that, and that's the one thing too. I mean, depending on what stage of your life you're in, your needs and your wants change, and you know, they're constantly evolving. I mean, that's something that you always have to keep in mind as well. Is that I always think about just having the ability to have choice in your life is something that a lot of people take for granted. Like just being able to make choices, on your own on what direction you want your life to take. A lot of people don't have that. So,
Yeah.
well, as we kind of come to a close here, let us know how we can get a hold of you, how listeners can find out more about you and the things that you offer.
Absolutely. First, if you're still listening to this episode, it's because you love Ryan and the things that he's doing, and he's pouring his heart and soul into this. So the first thing I want you to do is go to this website of this podcast, go to the Apple spot for this podcast, leave a review, like it, share it, subscribe it, the whole thing, because it's the least you can do for all the effort he's putting in to get this message out to you.
I did not pay for that.
If you still
nice
have if you still have any energy left, you're more than welcome to come check me out. My website is www.spearandclover.com. You can email me directly at jason@spearandclover.com. My platform of choice is Instagram. I'm Jason Skisick or Spear and Clover on that platform, as well as all of the other platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I'm not on TikTok. Come check out. And by the way, I would like to offer you, Ryan, and anybody listening to this that's an entrepreneur, a free test drive of our mastermind. We meet on the first and third Fridays of every single month. There's a brand new expert guest speaker, and you will have the opportunity to work through some of your problems with other like-minded entrepreneurs.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate you taking the time and just being so generous to our listeners.
Of course, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Sure.